Hello, everyone. My name's Michael Thompson. I'm 62 years old, a retired architect from Vancouver, where I've spent most of my life designing homes and buildings that stand the test of time. But today, I'm not here to talk about blueprints or structures. I'm here to share a story that's more personal, more raw, and honestly more heartbreaking than anything I've ever built or torn down. This is the story of how I discovered my brother's betrayal, how my mother outsmarted us all, and how revenge came in the form of truth revealed at the most dramatic moment imaginable. It's a tale of greed, love, deception, and ultimately, justice. Settle in, because this is going to be a long one. I want you to feel every emotion I felt, every twist that kept me up at night. Let's start from the beginning, and I'll take you through it, step by step, with all the details that made it so unforgettable. It all began on a rainy Wednesday morning in early February 2025. I was in my cozy apartment overlooking the harbor, sipping my third cup of black coffee, strong, no sugar, just like my father used to make it back when we were kids. The rain was pounding against the windows, a steady rhythm that matched the ache in my joints from years hunched over drafting tables and trudging through construction sites in all kinds of weather. I'd been up since dawn, sketching ideas for a community center I was volunteering to design, trying to keep my mind busy. Retirement had its perks, but it also left too much time for memories to creep in, especially since losing my wife, Laura, 5 years earlier. My phone buzzed on the kitchen counter, vibrating against the granite surface, and I glanced at the screen. It was my brother, Richard. We hadn't spoken in over a month, not since that awkward family dinner at Mom's place, where tensions had simmered just below the surface, unspoken words hanging in the air like storm clouds. I answered, expecting maybe small talk or an update on his kids, but Richard's voice on the other end was somber, almost too rehearsed, like he was reading from a script he'd practiced. "Michael," he said, his tone heavy with what sounded like forced gravity, "I have bad news. Mom passed away last night. It was peaceful, in her sleep." My world tilted on its axis. I gripped the counter to steady myself, the coffee mug slipping from my other hand and clattering into the sink. What? How? I was going to call her today to check in on her garden. She was so excited about the new tulip bulbs. Richard didn't miss a beat, his voice shifting to something more clipped, more businesslike. "The funeral's set for Saturday. I've handled everything. The arrangements, the notices, oh, and about the will. It's straightforward. Everything goes to me. The house in Victoria, the cabin up in Whistler, her savings, the whole lot. You get zilch. Don't bother fighting it." Click. He hung up without another word. No condolences, no shared grief, no reminiscing about the woman who raised us. Just a cold declaration of inheritance, like he was closing a real estate deal. Something twisted deep in my gut, a knot of disbelief and rising anger. This wasn't right. This wasn't how brothers talked about their mother's death. I stood there in the kitchen, staring at the phone in my hand as if it might explain what had just happened. The rain outside seemed louder now, drumming insistently, mirroring the pounding in my chest. My mind raced back to childhood memories, trying to reconcile this callous Richard with the boy I'd grown up with. We were close once, Richard and I. Born 4 years apart, we shared a bedroom in our modest home in Burnaby, a suburb of Vancouver, where the mountains loomed in the distance on clear days. Dad was a mechanic, always tinkering in the garage with oil-stained hands, teaching us how to fix bikes and cars. Mom, Eleanor, was a librarian, the kind who could recommend the perfect book for any mood, filling our heads with adventures from far-off lands. Summers were spent at the Whistler cabin, a rustic place Mom and Dad had scrimped and saved to buy. We'd hike trails carpeted with pine needles, fish and crystal-clear lakes where the water was so cold it took your breath away, and sit around the campfire at night, roasting marshmallows until they were golden and gooey. Mom would tell stories, ghost tales that made us huddle closer, or family legends about our grandparents' immigration from England. Richard was the charismatic one, always the center of attention, while I was quieter, sketching the landscapes around us with crayons and later pencils. But as adults, life pulled us in different directions. I pursued architecture, building homes that families could make memories in, marrying Laura, my college sweetheart, and having our son, Alex. Richard became a high-end realtor, chasing commissions on luxury properties, marrying Sophia, a teacher with a warm smile, and having 3 kids, 2 boys and a girl, who adored their Uncle Alex during holidays. On the surface, everything seemed fine, but I'd noticed the cracks over the years. Richard's deals didn't always pan out. There were whispers at family gatherings about investments gone bad, loans from friends unpaid, Sophia picking up extra tutoring gigs to cover the mortgage on their sprawling house in North Vancouver. And Mom? She was the glue, always mediating, always loving us equally, or so I thought.
Mom, Eleanor Thompson, was 83 when this all unfolded, but she'd always been a force of nature, sharp-witted, independent, with a laugh that could light up a room. She ran book clubs at the local library, even after retiring, tended a garden bursting with roses and herbs that she used to make teas for every ailment, and played bridge with a group of friends twice a week, often coming home with stories of her clever wins. She lived alone in her Victorian house, a charming Victorian with creaky floors and a wraparound porch where she'd sit with a book and a cup of chamomile. Until about a year ago, that is, when Richard convinced her to grant him power of attorney. "Just in case, Mom," he'd said during one of our dinners, his voice smooth as silk. "You know, for bills, medical stuff, it'll make things easier." Mom hesitated, her blue eyes narrowing slightly as she stirred her soup, but Richard was persuasive, always had been. He was her younger son, the one she'd babied a bit more after Dad's heart attack back in 2010. So she agreed, and that's when everything changed. Within months, Mom was diagnosed with severe dementia. It came on so suddenly. One visit, she'd be reciting poetry from memory, quoting Shakespeare with a twinkle in her eye, and the next, she was confused, forgetting names, staring blankly at the walls. Richard moved her into Ocean View Senior Living, a facility on the outskirts of Vancouver with manicured lawns and cheerful staff, saying she couldn't live alone anymore. When I visited her there the first time, I was devastated. My vibrant mother, the woman who'd encouraged my drawing by buying me endless sketch pads, sat in a wheelchair by the window, her silver hair unkempt, her hands folded limply in her lap. She didn't recognize me. Who are you?" she'd mumble, her voice frail and distant. I'd sit with her anyway, holding her hand, telling her about Alex's latest tech project or the community center designs. Her doctor, Dr. Elena Vasquez, a poised woman in her 50s with a reassuring bedside manner, explained it to me in her office one afternoon. "Dementia can progress rapidly in some elderly patients," she said, adjusting her glasses. "Eleanor's case is unfortunate, but not uncommon. The cognitive decline can seem sudden because early signs are often subtle." It didn't sit right with me. The speed of it all felt off, but grief clouded my judgment, and I trusted the professionals. Back to that rainy morning after Richard's call, the shock of his words morphed into a burning suspicion. "You get zilch." Why lead with that? Why not share in the loss? I paced the kitchen, the tile cold under my bare feet, my coffee forgotten and growing cold. I decided to verify. With trembling fingers, I dialed Ocean View Senior Living. The receptionist answered on the second ring, her voice cheerful despite the early hour. "Ocean View, how can I help?" "I'm inquiring about my mother, Eleanor Thompson. I heard she passed away last night." There was a long pause, the sound of typing on a keyboard. "Mr. Thompson, that's not in our records. Let me double-check her status." My heart pounded in my ears, each beat like a drum. Minutes stretched eternally as I stared out at the harbor, boats bobbing in the choppy water. Finally, she returned. "Sir, she's fine. She's actually in the dining hall right now, having breakfast. Oatmeal with blueberries, her favorite. Is there some confusion?" Relief flooded me, followed by a wave of fury. Yes, major confusion. Please don't mention this call to anyone, especially my brother. I hung up, my hands shaking so badly I nearly dropped the phone. Mom was alive. Richard had lied. Why? The answer hit me like a freight train. The estate. He was trying to claim it all, perhaps thinking he could fake her death and transfer assets before anyone noticed. It was insane, but the pieces fit. His financial troubles, the rushed POA, the sudden dementia. I needed help. I called my son, Alex. He answered sleepily. It was even earlier in Toronto. "Dad, what's going on? It's like 4 a.m. here." "Alex, listen. Uncle Richard just told me Grandma died, but I called the home. She's alive. I think he's trying to steal her estate." Silence. Then Alex's voice, alert now. "What? That's elder abuse, Dad. Fraud. Possibly worse. What are you going to do?" "I don't know yet, but the funeral he mentioned is Saturday. That's just 3 days away. I need to act fast." We talked for an hour, Alex offering support, suggesting lawyers and investigators. His steady logic grounded me, reminding me of Laura's calm in crises. After hanging up, I spent the morning making calls, the rain outside turning to a relentless downpour that blurred the world beyond my windows. First, I contacted Lisa Wong, a lawyer I worked with on estate planning after Laura's death. She was sharp, no nonsense, with an office downtown overlooking the city skyline. I explained the situation over the phone, my words tumbling out. "Michael, this is serious," she said, her voice grave. "If Richard's misusing his power of attorney, faking her death to appropriate assets, we're talking criminal charges like fraud, theft, even attempted murder if there's foul play with her health. But you need evidence, solid, irrefutable evidence. Bank records, medical files, witnesses. Next, I hired a private investigator, Marcus Hale. He came highly recommended from a former colleague, a burly man in his 50s with a salt and pepper beard and eyes that missed nothing. He met me at a coffee shop that afternoon, rain dripping from his coat as he slid into the booth. "Tell me everything," he said, notebook in hand. I recounted the call, the verification, the background on Richard's finances. "How long has he had POA?" Marcus asked, scribbling notes. "About a year. Mom was fine before. Volunteering, gardening, mentally sharp." Marcus nodded. "Seen this before. Greed turns family ugly. Give me 24 hours. I'll start with financial trails." As I drove home through the slick streets, wipers swishing rhythmically, my mind replayed family moments. Like the time Richard and I built a treehouse in the backyard, Mom bringing lemonade and sandwiches, praising our architectural masterpiece. How had it come to this? That evening I drove to Ocean View, unannounced, the drive taking longer in the storm, headlights cutting through sheets of rain. I didn't call ahead, wanting to see things as they were. When I arrived, the lobby smelled of fresh-baked cookies, a comforting facade for the heartache inside. Mom's room was at the end of the hall, softly lit by a bedside lamp. She sat by the window, gazing at the darkened garden outside, rain pattering against the glass. Her once vibrant silver hair was dull and thin, her frame frailer than I remembered, wrapped in a knitted shawl I'd given her for Christmas. But tonight something seemed different, less vacant, more present in her eyes. "Mom," I said softly, pulling up a chair beside her, the wooden legs scraping against the linoleum floor. She turned slowly, her blue eyes meeting mine. There was a flicker. Recognition? Or was it my desperate imagination? "It's me, Michael, your son." She blinked, her mouth opening as if to speak, but no words came. Her hand twitched in her lap, and I took it gently, feeling the papery skin, the faint pulse. "I brought photos," I said, pulling out my phone to show pictures of Alex at a recent conference, his smile wide as he presented his work. "Look, Alex is doing great in Toronto. He misses you."
She stared at the screen, a small sound escaping her lips. A sigh? Before I could say more, a nurse entered, clipboard in hand, to check vitals. "Evening, Mr. Thompson. She's had a quiet day." The moment shattered, and I left soon after, driving home with a storm raging inside me, as fierce as the one outside. What was Richard planning? A fake funeral to convince the world she was gone, then quietly liquidate everything? It was audacious, villainous even. But if he was desperate enough from debts, it made a twisted sense. Marcus called the next morning as I was brewing fresh coffee, the aroma filling the apartment, a small comfort in the chaos. "Michael, you better sit down for this." I sat at the kitchen table, phone pressed to my ear, staring at the harbor where fog now shrouded the boats. "Your brother's been busy. In the past 11 months, he's transferred about $350,000 from your mother's accounts into his own, or joint accounts with Sophia. He sold the Whistler cabin to a numbered company. I'm tracing it, but early signs point to him being the beneficial owner. He's maxed out her credit cards on personal expenses, luxury items, trips. And get this, Dr. Elena Vasquez, the one who diagnosed the dementia, she and Richard went to university together. They're in the same golf league, have been for years. Social media shows them at events." I felt sick, bile rising in my throat. So the dementia, it could be faked? Medication-induced? Exactly. If she's being overprescribed sedatives or antipsychotics, it would mimic severe cognitive decline, the vacancy, the confusion. We've seen cases where it's used to control elders for financial gain. That's not just abuse, it's potentially attempted murder if it endangers her life. What do I do? Get her medical records. Lisa can help subpoena if needed. Document everything. Record calls with Richard if you talk. BC's one-party consent for recordings. Visit Mom. Note any changes. I thanked him, hanging up with a resolve hardening in my chest. This wasn't just about money. It was about protecting Mom. That afternoon, I returned to Ocean View, phone in pocket set to record if needed. The rain had stopped, leaving a fresh, earthy scent in the air. I signed in at the desk, chatting briefly with the receptionist about the weather, trying to seem casual. But when I reached Mom's room, it was empty, the bed neatly made, her shawl folded on the chair, no sign of her. Panic surged. "Where's my mother?" I asked a passing nurse, a young woman with a ponytail and a name tag reading Katie. "Oh, Mr. Thompson, your brother took her out for a walk earlier. Said she needed some fresh air to perk her up." My blood ran cold. "When? How long ago?" "About an hour. They should be back soon." I waited in the lobby, pacing the carpeted floor, watching the clock tick slowly. Scenarios raced through my mind. What if he was harming her, taking her somewhere to stage an accident? Finally, 3 hours later, Richard's silver SUV pulled up. He helped Mom out, her steps shuffling, arm linked through his. She looked exhausted, her face pale, eyes downcast. Richard spotted me as they entered. "Michael," he said, annoyance flashing across his face before he masked it with a smile. "What brings you here today? You said Mom died yesterday, yet here she is, alive and, well, sort of." "That. Yeah, sorry about the mix-up. I meant to call you back. It was a false alarm. Mom had a really bad episode, seizure-like thing. Thought it was the end. You know how these dementia cases go." "Where did you take her?" I pressed, stepping closer, smelling his cologne mixed with the faint scent of rain. "Just for a drive around the park. She likes getting out, seeing the trees." But Mom looked like she could barely stand, leaning heavily on him. "Really? She seems drained." "Back off, Michael." His voice dropped low, edged with steel. "I'm her power of attorney. I make the decisions about her care, not you. If you want to challenge that, get a lawyer, but stay out of it." He brushed past me, guiding Mom to her room. Through the open door, I watched him settle her into her chair, whispering something I couldn't hear, his hand on her shoulder. Then he left, not glancing back as he strode away. I was about to follow Mom in when my phone buzzed, an unknown number. I almost ignored it, but curiosity won. "Hello?" Silence at first. Then a whisper, faint and scratchy like wind through leaves. "Michael." "Yes, who is this?" "Michael, it's me." I froze in the hallway, the fluorescent lights buzzing overhead. That couldn't be. Mom was right there in her room, and this call. I checked the screen. Blocked number. "Michael, listen carefully. I don't have much time. I need you to come to my room tonight, late, after 11 o'clock. Make sure Richard isn't here, and don't tell anyone about this call." The line went dead. I stood there, heart hammering, the phone still pressed to my ear. Impossible. Mom could barely string 2 words together these days. And yet, that voice, even whispered and strained, sounded like her, the real her, the sharp, clear-minded woman who'd raised me, who taught me to see the beauty in structures, both physical and familial. Doubt warred with hope. Was this a trick, Richard playing games, or something more miraculous? I decided to find out.
I waited in my car in the Ocean View parking lot until after 11 p.m., the night dark and still, stars peeking through parting clouds. Richard's SUV was long gone. The night shift had taken over, a skeleton crew with dimmed lights in the hallways. I used the visitor code to enter through a side door, my footsteps echoing softly as I made my way to Mom's room. The door was ajar, a sliver of light spilling out. I pushed it open, and there she was, sitting up in bed, the covers neatly folded, the room lit by a small lamp. When she turned to look at me, her eyes were clear, focused, completely lucid, no trace of the fog I'd seen for months. "Close the door," she said in a normal voice, strong and steady, not the confused mumble I'd grown accustomed to. I shut it behind me, my hands shaking, the click of the latch loud in the quiet. "Mom, what? How?" "Sit down, sweetheart. We need to talk, and we don't have much time." I pulled the chair closer, sinking into it, my mind reeling. Are you okay? What's happening here?" My mother, who I'd thought was lost forever in the haze of dementia, smiled at me, a real smile, with that wry expression I remembered from childhood when she'd catch Richard and me sneaking cookies from the jar before dinner, her eyes twinkling with amusement mixed with sternness. "I'm fine, Michael. I've been fine this whole time. But the dementia, the diagnosis, you couldn't even recognize me because I was pretending." The room seemed to tilt, the walls closing in. "Pretending? Mom, that doesn't make sense. The doctors, the tests." She reached over and took my hand, her grip firm and steady, nothing like the weak, trembling hold I'd felt during visits. Her skin was warm, alive with purpose. "Michael, I'm 83 years old. I've been thinking a lot about mortality these past few years, about what happens when I'm gone, about the legacy I leave behind, not just money or property, but the character of my sons. I realized I needed to know something important. I needed to know which of you would actually take care of me, not for my money, not for any inheritance, but because you loved me, truly, unconditionally." "So you faked dementia to test us?" The words felt absurd saying them out loud, but her nod confirmed it. When Richard suggested becoming my power of attorney, I saw an opportunity. I agreed, but I also consulted my own lawyer, someone Richard doesn't know about, an old friend from my book club days. I put most of my assets into an irrevocable trust weeks before he got the POA. The accounts he had access to, I only left enough in them to see what he'd do, like bait in a trap. I couldn't process it all, my head spinning. "Mom, why didn't you tell me? Why put me through the pain of thinking I'd lost you?" Her eyes grew sad, a shadow crossing her face. "Because I had to test both of you, fairly. I had to see who would visit me when I couldn't give anything back, who would hold my hand even when I acted like I had no idea who I was. And Michael, you came faithfully, 3 times a week sometimes. You sat with me, talked about Alex, about your designs, even when I pretended not to understand.
You showed up." Tears welled in my eyes, spilling over as I squeezed her hand. "Of course I came. You're my mother. I love you." I know that now, more than ever. But Richard, she shook her head, her voice dropping. "Richard failed, Michael, worse than I ever imagined. I've been documenting everything, every time he visited to pressure me to sign papers, transfer deeds, account changes. Every time he got frustrated when I played confused, scribbling nonsense instead of my signature. Every time he took something from this room, a piece of jewelry, thinking I wouldn't notice in my state. I have it all recorded, hidden devices my lawyer helped set up." "The $350,000? He took it from the bait accounts. I've been letting him dig his own grave, gathering evidence." "Mom, he told me you were dead. He's planning a funeral for Saturday." She nodded, her expression hardening. "I know. He told me today during our walk. It was more like a drive to a secluded spot where he tried to coerce me. He said I was going to have an accident, that I'd pass away peacefully soon. He wanted me to agree to sign final papers first, transferring everything officially, but I refused, played the confused card again. He's running out of time, desperate because his debts are piling up, bad investments, gambling, I suspect. This is insane, dangerous. We need to call the police right now." "No, not yet. Lisa Wong, your lawyer, she's been mine too for the past month. We have a plan in place, but I need you to trust me, Michael. Can you do that?" I looked into her eyes, seeing the strength there, the woman who survived losing Dad, who'd built a life of meaning. "Always, Mom." Over the next 2 days, we set everything up meticulously, like architects drafting a blueprint for justice. Lisa came to my apartment first, her briefcase full of documents, rain still dripping from her umbrella. We conferenced with Mom via a secure line she'd arranged. "The police are involved now," Lisa explained, spreading papers on my table. "But discreetly, we want to catch Richard in the act for irrefutable evidence. Charges could include elder abuse, fraud, theft over $5,000, even attempted manslaughter if the meds are proven harmful." We installed hidden cameras in Mom's room, tiny devices the size of buttons, hidden in picture frames and lamps, provided by Marcus. We coordinated with select Ocean View staff we could trust, Katie the nurse for one, who'd noticed oddities with Richard's visits. And Mom continued her act flawlessly, playing the declining patient whenever Richard was around, mumbling incoherently, staring blankly. Richard visited twice more in those days. The first time, Wednesday evening, he brought a stack of papers, transfer devices for the Victoria house. I watched the video later, hidden in my apartment, the video grainy but clear. "Mom, just sign here," he said, guiding her hand, his voice coaxing but edged with impatience. She scribbled illegibly, a squiggle that looked like a child's drawing. "No, clearly, Mom, I'm trying to help you, to make sure everything's taken care of." His frustration boiled over. He slammed the pen down, pacing the room, muttering about wasted time. The second visit, Thursday night, was worse. He brought a small vial of pills, disguised as her regular medication. "Time for your dose, Mom," he said sweetly, helping her swallow them. But Mom palmed them expertly, later flushing them away. We had the vial tested. A lab Marcus knew confirmed it was a massive dose of sedatives, enough to induce coma or worse in someone her age. On the recording, as he smoothed her hair, he whispered, "Tomorrow, you'll finally be at peace, Mom. No more suffering. It'll look naturally." Saturday morning dawned clear, the rain finally gone, sunlight streaming through my windows as I prepared for the confrontation. Richard had gone all out with the funeral. Booked Harborview Chapel, an elegant venue with stained glass windows and polished wood pews. He'd sent out notices via email and calls. The obituary he'd written full of flowery lies. Eleanor Thompson, beloved mother and librarian, passed peacefully after a long illness. Relatives called me with condolences, cousins from Alberta, aunts from England, their voices choked with emotion. I played along, my voice steady despite the rage inside. Yes, very sudden.
The service is at 2 p.m. Alex flew in that morning, hugging me tightly at the airport. Dad, this is wild, but we're with Grandma now. We drove to the chapel together, the air thick with anticipation. The place was packed. Family, friends from Mom's book club, old colleagues. Flowers overflowed, lilies and roses, Mom's favorites, ironically. A large photo of her from 20 years ago stood at the front, her smile radiant. I sat in the front row with Alex, my suit feeling constrictive, heart pounding. Richard sat across the aisle with Sophia and their kids, the boys fidgeting, the girl clutching a tissue. His face was composed, appropriately sorrowful, dabbing at dry eyes. Sophia touched his arm comfortingly, unaware. At exactly 2 p.m., Richard stood, adjusting his tie, and walked to the podium. He cleared his throat, the microphone amplifying his words. We're here today to celebrate the life of Eleanor Thompson, born March 5, 1942, passed away January 10, 2025. Mom was an incredible woman, a librarian who ignited imaginations, a mother who always put her children first. In her final months, she trusted me to care for her. She knew I would protect her interests, manage her affairs, ensure she was comfortable. I couldn't take it anymore. I stood up, every head in the room turning, whispers rippling like waves. It's interesting, Richard, I said loudly, my voice echoing in the hushed space. Where to tell everyone where Mom really is right now? Confusion spread, murmurs, shifted seats. Richard's face drained of color, his hands gripping the podium. Michael, sit down. This isn't the time for your jealousy. Where's the body, Richard? Where's Mom's body? She's being cremated. We discussed this as a family. Really? Because I called the crematorium. They have no record of her. Sophia grabbed his arm, her eyes wide. Richard, what is he talking about? The doors at the back of the chapel burst open. Every person turned, and there, framed in the doorway, was Mom. She walked in slowly, using a walker for support, but her back was straight, her chin high, dressed in a simple blue dress that matched her eyes. Behind her, 2 police officers in uniform followed, their badges gleaming. The room erupted, gasps, cries, someone fainting in the back. Richard's daughter burst into sobs, clinging to Sophia. Mom made her way down the aisle, the walker thumping softly, eyes locked on Richard. When she reached him, she stopped. Hello, son, she said clearly, her voice ringing out. I'm not dead, but your inheritance is. Richard's mouth opened and closed fish-like. Mom, you're confused. You're sick. This is a mistake. Someone's manipulating you. I'm not confused, Richard. I've been recording everything for the past 11 months. Every threat, every theft, every time you tried to force me to sign documents transferring my assets to you, every time you drugged me to keep me compliant.
She turned to the assembled crowd, many weeping now, some in relief, others in shock. I'm sorry for deceiving all of you. It pained me to lie, to pretend, but I had to know the truth. I had to see what my son would do when he thought I was helpless, when he thought there was money to gain. And what I found broke my heart. One of the officers stepped forward, his voice authoritative. Richard Thompson, you're under arrest for elder abuse, theft over $5,000, fraud, and attempted probate fraud. You have the right to remain silent. Richard panicked, trying to bolt, pushing past the officer toward a side door, but he only made it a few steps before being tackled to the ground, handcuffs clicking into place. His kids sobbed louder, Sophia frozen in horror, hand over her mouth. As they led him away, he twisted, shouting back at Mom, I'm your son. You can't do this to me. I needed that money, for the family, for everything. Mom watched him go, tears streaming down her cheeks, but her voice was steady, unwavering. You were my son, but you stopped being my child the moment you decided my life was worth less than my bank account. The legal proceedings dragged on for months, a grueling process of court dates, testimonies, and paperwork that tested our endurance. Richard initially fought the charges, his lawyer arguing that Mom was indeed incompetent, that he was just trying to help amid her decline. but the evidence was overwhelming, a mountain too high to climb. Video footage from the hidden cams showed him coercing signatures, administering the overdose pills. Audio recordings captured his threats, "Sign or it'll get worse, Mom." Bank records detailed the $350,000 siphoned off, used for gambling debts and luxury purchases. Dr. Vasquez granted immunity for her cooperation, testifying tearfully about how Richard had pressured her to prescribe unnecessary medications, falsified diagnoses for his gain. "I regret it every day," she said on the stand. In the end, Richard pleaded guilty to reduced charges. His shoulder slumped in the courtroom. The judge was unforgiving. 7 years in prison, ordered to repay the $350,000 plus $75,000 in fines. He lost his real estate license permanently, his reputation in ruins. Sophia filed for divorce shortly after, gaining full custody of the kids. They were devastated, the boys angry, the girl withdrawn, but Alex and I stepped in, offering stability. We hosted them for weekends, took them hiking in Whistler, the cabin repurchased with trust funds, helped with homework over video calls. It wasn't easy mending those bonds, but family, real family, perseveres. Dr. Vasquez faced her own reckoning. The College of Physicians and Surgeons of British Columbia revoked her license after an investigation revealed her ethical breaches, prescribing dangerous meds without proper evaluation, all at Richard's behest. She moved away, her career over. As for Mom, she thrived. She moved into a cozy condo near my apartment, downsizing from the big house, saying she was done with maintenance, ready for simplicity. It had a small balcony for her herbs, close enough for daily walks together. She resumed volunteering at a senior center, leading book discussions, her mind as sharp as ever. We had dinner twice a week, her famous lasagna, rich with cheese and sauce, or my grilled salmon, with stories shared over wine. Alex visited often, the three of us laughing about old times, healing the wounds. With part of the repaid money, we established the Eleanor Thompson Senior Safeguard Initiative, a fund providing legal aid to elders facing abuse, funding workshops on POA responsibilities, warning signs like isolation or sudden financial changes. One evening, about a year later, Mom and I sat on my balcony watching the sunset paint the harbor in oranges and pinks, a light breeze carrying the salt air. She held a mug of herbal tea, wrapped in a blanket against the chill. "Do you ever regret it?" I asked quietly. "The test? The pretense?" She was silent for a long moment, sipping her tea, eyes on the horizon. "I regret that it was necessary. I regret that my own son could stoop so low, betray the values we taught him. But Michael, I don't regret finding out the truth. I had to know who would love me when I had nothing to give." "You gave me everything that mattered," I replied, voice thick. "You taught me integrity, to build things that last, not just buildings, but relationships, to do the right thing, even when it's hard, especially when it's hard." She smiled, reaching over to squeeze my hand. "And that's why you passed the test. Not just because you visited, though that meant the world, but because even when you thought I was gone, even when you thought you'd get nothing, you fought for what was right. You didn't let Richard get away with it. You protected me even when I couldn't protect myself. That's what family does." We sat in comfortable silence, the sun dipping below the water, city lights twinkling on. Inside, my phone buzzed. Alex calling for our weekly check-in, probably with updates on his life in Toronto. Mom's lawyer, with news on the fund's latest case, helped. Life moving forward, scars fading, but lessons etched deep. "You know what the saddest part is?" Mom said suddenly. "What?" "If Richard had just asked, if he'd been honest about his financial problems, the bad deals, the debts, I would have helped him. Not with everything, not enabling his mistakes, but I would have given guidance, some support. Instead, he chose to steal, to deceive, to treat me like I was already dead. And that choice cost him everything: his freedom, his family, his self-respect. I didn't know what to say, so I just held her hand. This remarkable woman who taught me more about strength and dignity in that year than in all the decades before. She'd survived betrayal by her own flesh and blood, orchestrated her own rescue with cunning and courage, and emerged determined to help others avoid the same fate. Looking back now with the clarity that time brings, I can see that the early signs of trouble were there all along, subtle hints that something was amiss in our family dynamic. It started right after Dad passed away in 2010, when Richard began to change in ways that were hard to pinpoint at first. He became more secretive about his finances, flashing money around in ways that didn't add up. New watches, expensive dinners out with Sophia, even though I knew some of his real estate deals had fallen through. Family gatherings turned tense. There were moments when he'd pull Mom aside, asking for loans to tide him over, promising quick repayments that stretched on indefinitely. I remember one Christmas dinner where he casually mentioned a hot investment opportunity, his eyes lighting up as he described potential returns. But Mom just smiled politely and changed the subject. I always made sure to pay back anything I borrowed from her promptly, out of respect. But Richard's debts lingered like unpaid bills, excuses piling up like snowdrifts in winter. Mom's independence started to wane, not because of her age, but because of Richard's growing influence over her decisions. He was always there, suggesting changes, upgrading her phone plan, handling her investments to maximize returns. It felt off, but I chalked it up to him being the business-minded one. Then came the dinner where he pitched the power of attorney idea. It was a cozy evening in Mom's Victoria house, the table set with her best china, candles flickering in the dim light, casting warm shadows on the walls lined with bookshelves overflowing with novels and photo albums. The air smelled of roasted chicken and herbs from her garden, a meal she'd prepared with care. Richard was in top form that night, his voice smooth and reassuring as he leaned forward, fork paused mid-air. "Mom, think about it. Power of attorney isn't about taking control. It's about protection. With your health so good now, it's the perfect time. I can handle the bills, the medical appointments if needed. It'll give you peace of mind." He smiled, that charming smile of his, the one that had closed countless deals. Mom sat there, thoughtfully chewing a bite of her salad, her fork tapping lightly against the plate as she considered his words. She looked between us, her blue eyes searching, perhaps sensing the undercurrent. "I don't know, Richard. I'm still managing fine on my own." But he persisted, gently, painting pictures of what-if scenarios, a fall, a forgotten bill. Eventually, after more back and forth, she nodded, setting down her napkin. "All right, if it makes things easier." I didn't push back then. I trusted her judgment. But looking back, that nod was the beginning of the unraveling.
The visits during her supposed decline were the hardest part, each one a fresh wave of heartache that left me drained. A drive to Ocean View in the late afternoons, the sun setting over the water, turning the sky into a canvas of pinks and oranges that reminded me of better days. Walking into her room, the sterile smell of antiseptic mixing with the faint floral scent of her favorite lotion, I'd find her sitting there, hands cold and limp in her lap, her gaze distant like she was lost in some far-off memory. I'd take those hands in mine, rubbing them gently to warm them, feeling the fragility of her bones beneath the skin. "Mom, remember the sunsets at Whistler?" I'd whisper, my voice soft to not startle her. The way the light would dance on the lake, turning everything golden. We'd sit on the dock, feet dangling in the water, talking about nothing and everything. Sometimes she'd mumble something incoherent, her words slurring like a half-forgotten dream. But other times there'd be a brief flicker, a squeeze of her hand, a turn of her head that made me wonder if she was still in there, fighting. I'd stay for hours, reading from her favorite books, sharing updates about Alex's life, the community projects I was sketching. Leaving was always the worst, that ache in my chest as I kissed her forehead, promising to return soon. The discovery hit like a thunderclap when Marcus delivered his full report. I remember sitting in my living room that evening, the lamp casting a warm glow over the papers spread across the coffee table. Marcus had emailed the details, but I printed them out, needing to feel the weight of the evidence in my hands. As I read aloud to myself, pacing the room, the numbers jumped off the page, damning transfers of funds, dates aligning perfectly with Richard's POA takeover. $50,000 moved here, $100,000 there, all funneled into accounts linked to his business debts. The Whistler cabin sale, undervalued and routed through a shell company that traced back to him. Emails between Richard and Dr. Vasquez, casual mentions of adjusting meds and keeping things smooth. My voice cracked as I read, anger building with each line, the betrayal sinking in deeper. This wasn't just mismanagement, it was calculated theft, a web of deceit spun around our mother. The reveal that night in her room remains etched in my memory, a turning point that shifted everything from despair to determination. Slipping into ocean view under the cover of darkness, the hallways quiet save for the hum of distant machines, I pushed open her door with bated breath. There she was, alert and composed, her grip on my hand firm and reassuring as she pulled me close. "Sit, Michael," she said, her voice steady, like the narrator in one of the stories she used to read us as kids. As she unfolded the plan, it was like listening to a masterful tale, how she'd anticipated Richard's greed, set up the trust in secret, left just enough in accessible accounts to test the waters. I had to know, truly know, her words weaving the narrative of her pretense, the hidden recordings, the quiet alliances with her lawyer. It was a story of cunning and heartbreak, one where the hero was my 83-year-old mother, outsmarting the villain in her own family. Orchestrating the takedown felt like piecing together a complex design, every element crucial. We held meetings in hushed tones, Lisa at my apartment, going over legal strategies, Marcus providing tech for the hidden cameras. Under the cover of night, we installed them in Mom's room, tiny devices tucked into vents and frames, wires carefully concealed. "This will capture everything," Marcus whispered as we worked, the moonlight filtering through the window. Police briefings followed, officers nodding gravely as we laid out the evidence, agreeing to let the plan play out for an airtight case. It was tense, exhilarating, a blueprint for justice drawn in shadows. Reviewing Richard's visits on the footage was gut-wrenching, my anger rising like a tide with each clip. I'd sit at my computer late into the night, screen glowing, watching him enter her room with false smiles, papers in hand. "Just sign, Mom," he'd urge, his patience fraying as she feigned confusion. The syringe incident, him administering what we later knew were overdoses, made my blood boil, fists clenching as I paused and replayed, noting every detail for the authorities. It was proof, yes, but also a painful window into his descent, greed eclipsing any remnant of brotherly love. Preparing for the funeral was a surreal exercise in deception, my inner turmoil churning beneath a calm exterior. Fielding calls from relatives offering condolences, my voice steady as I confirmed details, all while knowing the truth. "Yes, it's sudden," I'd say, stomach twisting.
Packing for the chapel, choosing a suit, rehearsing my interruption, it was like scripting a play where the stakes were our family soul. The climax at the podium was pure drama, tension thick as Richard spoke his lies. My stand shattered the facade, words cutting through the air. Then the doors opened, Mom entering like a phoenix, the collective breath of the room held in stunned silence, erupting into chaos that marked the end of the charade. In the aftermath, mending the family was slow, tender work. Richard's kids, shattered by the arrest, found solace in our outreach, weekends with Alex and me, hikes where tentative smiles emerged amid talks of rebuilding trust. Mom's advocacy became her new chapter, delivering speeches at senior centers, her eyes alight with purpose as she shared her story, empowering others to spot and stop abuse. Our porch reflections that evening, watching the sunset, were moments of shared wisdom, bonds strengthened through trial, her hand in mine a reminder of enduring love. The lessons learned were profound: vigilance in love, recognizing abuse signs like sudden financial oddities or forced isolation, urging action to protect the elderly. Personally, I grew immensely. Gratitude for reclaimed time with Mom, a newfound purpose in advocating protection, transforming pain into positive change. And that's my story, from the shadow of betrayal to the light of truth. Through it all, we discovered an unbreakable strength within ourselves and our bonds. Remember, protect the vulnerable, cherish real family. It shows up when it counts, fights for what's right, and loves without expecting anything in return. Thanks for joining me on this journey. If it helps even one person spot the signs of abuse and take action, then sharing it has been worth every moment.